11 years ago, I was starring in a new play in this theatre in the West End. After just 3 performances, I walked out. In the early hours of the next morning, I came down from my flat in central London to this lane. I went into my garage, sealed the door with a duvet I brought, and got into my car.
Sat there for at least, I think, 2 hours in the car, my hands on the ignition key. It was a suicide attempt, not a cry for help.
I drove to the south coast and took a ferry to Europe.
I just knew I couldn't be at home. I couldn't be in London. I couldn't be in England. I really believed that I would never come back to England. Runaway Stephen Fry broke his silence last night to reveal the torture he's been suffering. They all are worried that I've committed suicide. That's the awful thing.
But after a week, I secretly returned to England to this hospital and to a doctor telling me that I was bipolar. I'd never heard the word before, but for the first time, at the age of 37, I had a diagnosis that explained the massive highs and miserable lows I've lived with all my life. With the psychiatrist's diagnosis came his advice for treatment. Like many other manic depressives, I was told to reduce the stress in my life, take time off, stop working so hard. I came here to Los Angeles, walked this beach every day, got surprisingly fit, and thought about his other course of treatment, the drug lithium. That's the standard medication 7 out of 10 of those with manic depression are advised to take. But it's an old-fashioned drug, discovered about 60 years ago, and feared for its power to take away feeling, all feeling, making you a kind of zombie. I refused his offer and have never taken it. In fact, I've never been on any medication since that first diagnosis. But now, with my condition appearing to be getting worse, the results have shocked me.
A 0 on that scale is somebody who has absolutely no features of being bipolar at all. From what you've told me, you would score probably about 70. You fit well into the realm of people who have, full-blown manic episodes.
It's clear I have bipolarity more severely than I believed. I'm wondering if I'm wise. Until now, I haven't wanted my mood stabilized. But perhaps I'm wrong. Perhaps I don't need to fear the medication. I want to know how someone else in my business has coped, what choice they made. Now living in London, Richard Dreyfuss has spent most of his life battling bipolarity. As with me, it's led him into all kinds of scrapes. Like me, he eased the pain of his mood swings with street drugs and alcohol. Unlike me, he was willing to take what the doctors prescribed. Has that been the right choice?
In every conversation, sooner or later, I get up like this. And we're going to do this, and we're going to go here, and... I've recognized that at certain times my behavior has been capable of being off-putting, perhaps. I had screamed in faces of people who didn't deserve it. I had been, drunk and unruly and loud and awful, and I got into a car one night and I flipped the car.
Last October, Dreyfuss wrecked his car in Beverly Hills.
I was arrested. It was all public. Everyone knew about it. That's when I said to my doctor, you got to test me. There's something wrong with me that I would be behaving this way.
So you're on a pharmaceutical regime. Can you tell us what you take?
It's different things. It's things having to deal with manic depression and ADD and concentration and sleep and anxiety, and lithium. Lithium was the very first thing I took for many, many years. And now, 20 years later, 23 years later, I am just about not taking lithium.
I mean, there are those who are very afraid of lithium because they think of it as some kind of pharmacological zombie drug. Did you find that when you took it?
With lithium, I remember driving down Mulholland Drive one night, and all of a sudden, I was aware, after 10 days of taking it, that I had letterboxed, that I could feel this. It was an absolutely non-claustrophobic experience that took the top and bottom and said you could live here. And I was very happy to do so. I married with it. I had children by it. Reclaimed a career, if you want to put it that way.
Bring it on the barrel! I'm coming around again!
So we're talking about...
The late 70s.
Oh, late 70s. Oh, gosh, right. So the height of your powers.
Richard Dreyfuss in The Goodbye Girl was named the Best Actor.
I changed dramatically. I said to my doctor once, I have become a person I admire in the last few years. I have wept more. I have said I'm sorry more. I have succeeded in endeavors that were impossible and blah, 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 blah. And I could not have done that without this courage. And he said to me, it's not courage. It is the absence of anxiety. And that is as true a statement.
As many patients report cognitive dulling with many medicines in psychiatry. And that's particularly true in folks being treated with bipolar disorder. And some of that dulling of cognitive performance might not be due to the medicine at all, but might be a property of the illness.
Right.
And that by not taking medication, you might make that worse. The danger is that folks, and we know this is the case, that many patients with bipolar disorder just don't take the medicine. Colleagues in Edinburgh looked at what happened when folks gave up the lithium, and they showed that not only did patients relapse, as you might expect some of them to do, but some of them relapsed a lot faster than the pattern of their illness before they'd started lithium. I mean, for example, if someone stops and starts lithium, you will have more episodes of mania than you would have had you never taken it at all. If you discontinue your lithium, in the first year off lithium, the number of reported suicidal acts increases beyond the level that was there before.
Because it means once you start, you really have to stay on it for good.
Or in the longer term.
Yeah.
I clearly look preoccupied coming away from seeing Professor Reed, but it isn't because I'm worrying about his message, take medication and stay on it. It's because for the last few days, I've been feeling increasingly depressed.
Very sort of black stage at the moment, and would love to be somewhere else other than here, frankly. I'm fully aware I'm a very awful person to be with. I find it difficult to meet people's eyes. I find it very difficult to connect to people. I find it very... I just want to be alone, frankly. I'm just praying that it'll pass, basically, because it's fucking irritating, and I hate myself for it. I mean, I've never thought that I hear voices, but I do have a voice telling me I'm a complete cunt all the time in my head.
Usually when I feel like this, I hide away. I can't this time. For me, that numbing kind of depression comes 3 to 4 times a year and lasts a week to 10 days. I spend the time in the house, staring at the ceiling, still afraid to take antidepressants or mood stabilizers like lithium. So as you can see, I'm still very much in the grip of mood swings. A couple of years ago, I read a newspaper article by the parents of a 27-year-old girl called Zoe Schwartz. I wanted to talk to them about what was in Zoe's mind during her last depression.
And it was 7 o'clock, she hadn't come, and I said, let's ring the police after supper. I remember at 7:45, the police came.
In a flash, I knew what had happened. She went up to the end of the platform and she jumped very high. And the train driver then said, you know, it hit me at face level. She'd had it all planned.
Zoe was 27 when she killed herself. She was beautiful, articulate, very bright, with a master's degree from the London School of Economics. But she'd also spent almost 10 years trying to hide the symptoms of an illness that had already led to suicide attempts.
I can tell From the minute I hear your voice, what mood you're in. When you came back from Peru, and you were wildly depressed, and I was terribly worried about you. You just took to your bed for... You were black.
Yeah.
And somebody else who'd seen you rang and actually said, I'm terribly worried about Stephen, I'm not quite sure what to do, I don't know what's the matter with him. I was a bit sick with worry, and I can't remember if I thought, oh my God, here we go again.
Because I enjoyed myself in Peru, and
it was
just coming back and being...
there have been times when I've been worried about you, especially when you've been away, and I've just rather hated that sort of hotel room coming back on your own. Is sort of finding an excuse to ring you at about 9-ish, just to check you're up and about.
And I'm okay.
And you're okay.
Yeah.
And feeling slightly sick until I speak to you.
Yeah.
I'm quite dispirited that my condition continues to be such a worry to those around me. Yeah. Ellie Oakes was a director of finance at B&Q, a high flyer, but she also had manic depression, except she wouldn't admit it, not to anyone, not even herself. As a result, Ellie took no medication. Her symptoms got worse, and eventually she lost her job, her marriage, and nearly her children. I want to see her because of the individual way she's turned her life around. With an accountant's eye for spreadsheets, she began to keep a mood diary.
See, when I first did this graph, I was surprised that it looked like this, because I just kind of take each one as it comes. I don't think about it.
You rate from 0 to 3 your mania, and from 0 to -3 your depression. So 0 is, as it were, a stable mood. And the highest it goes to is 2, I notice. It peaks at 2. 3 you would regard as unmanageable, as dangerous?
Complete dangerous, I think. Yeah, I mean, dangerous to myself, yeah.
And to the happiness of the family,
absolutely.
And to the peace and everything.
What Ellie means is when high, she loves to spend and spend, forgets what she's left burning on the cooker, sleeps 4 hours a night for 8 weeks, and has the energy to update her new company website at 3 in the morning. But when she's done, she can't get out of bed. An obvious manic sign for me, as it is for Ellie, is excessive shopping and spending. Now, psychiatrists encourage manic depressives to notice wild behaviour and then hold it in check. To that end, they not only offer drug regimes, but more and more psychotherapy. One talking therapy that they say proves useful is called CBT, cognitive behaviour therapy. It emphasises changing how we think about what we're doing. I've never tried it, but I've often worried about how I shop when I'm manic, so I've asked Jan Scott, an expert in CBT, to come and try to help me keep things under control.
I've probably got about 9 digital cameras. How many pictures do I take? None. Absolutely none. Let me see now, here we've got sat-navs.
How many of those?
I've got about 5 sat-navs. Digital DVD projector. That's an interesting thing to have, don't you think?
What people always tell us is it's that it is driven. It's almost like an addiction that they don't feel able to stop it.
I think I have 12 computers. I must have something between 14 and 20 iPods.
I know a fair number of people are in for toys for the boys, but they don't have 14 iPods. They don't have 13 computers.
I tell you what it is. What you've discovered is that I'm insane. I'm actually mad. Good to see you. I'm really well. How are you? Oh, have you got the new Mac Mini? Yes, I'd love to. That's fantastic.
People do it, and they feel even more stimulated, more excited about it, and it feeds into this desperate, vicious cycle. And so one of the things we try and do with people is to recognise it absolutely right at the start of when they're becoming hypomanics. I don't want to be a killjoy here.
Yeah.
Is this because you really want this?
No, this is really practical and sensible, believe me.
Yeah?
This is brilliant.
Because you've only got 12 at home.
Yeah, but I know what you mean, but you see, I'm beginning to sweat now. No.
Could you stop yourself?
Probably wouldn't. I mean, in the mid-80s, I had 11 motor cars. It is my treat, and I'm aware that even if it were irrational, the fact is I worked so fucking hard that this is the few moments of pleasure I get.
Supposing somebody turned around and said, look, this is going to cause trouble if you do this. If you go home with this today, you know, it's going to be a bit of a fight on.
I would stab them in the throat with a pencil.
The photos on the wall tell the early part of Cordelia's story. A clever girl at school, a photographic memory for learning, and a creative urge to write a novel at 14. Then Oxford. But that's where the symptoms began. A third of each month she'd be depressed, the rest manic. By the time of her finals, her memory had gone. After university, her condition worsened, and she was eventually hospitalised.
What's
If
your...
you want to look at the mood scale, it's in the kitchen.
Oh, I'd love to. 8, inflated self-esteem, rapid thoughts and speech, counterproductive simultaneous tasks.
Yeah.
Yes, I recognise
That's
that one.
about where I was when I was in hospital, about 8.
No, I think you were at 9.
I was not in touch with reality. I was not paranoid and vindictive.
Cordelia's fears about her future depress her. But even worse is the effect her depression has on the one activity she loves, her writing. That's what she desperately hopes Jan Scott can help her with.
You've got this terrible problem that as soon as you slip a little bit below a normal mood state and you're depressed, your creativity disappears.
I suppose what I had thought is that when I was depressed, I would be able to write about being depressed, but I actually can't. I can't even write about being depressed when I'm depressed. I can't really write about anything.
For about the first 5 or 6 years of having the illness, I wouldn't ever be depressed for more than a couple of weeks. Literally, last time and the time before, towards the end, when I'd been depressed for sort of 9 or 10 weeks, I just thought, you know, I've never been depressed for this long before. I could never, you know, this could be the one that I never come out of.
I'm never going to be able to write again. I'm never going to be able to, you know, go out and socialise again. I'm never going to be able to really do anything again.
I mean, what does it say about you if you can't write? What's going through your mind? Can you say it?
She's very upset. She's picked up her bag. She looks as if she wants to walk out now.
I find watching later and talking Cordelia through her feelings very moving. It's fascinating to see how Jan uses cognitive therapy to unpack the deeper emotions within Cordelia.
But the most important thing I felt here was that she was identifying something so fundamental to her view of herself. And there's a point at which she can't even say the words about how she feels about it. This issue of she had grown up being seen as exceptional, and she felt the illness had taken this away from her.
I don't mind a bit of weakness in other people, if it's sexy sort of weakness. I hate weakness in myself. I think of myself as very strong and glittery and shiny and funny.
Right.
The writing is something that I'm good at, and that...
And so if you can't do that, that's the final straw.
Yeah.
Her self-esteem is partly tied up in her ability to be a writer, and she's had a lot of positive feedback about that in her past.
Yes.
And we've got to actually address that in terms of her beliefs.
Because otherwise
it becomes this vicious cycle,
and
and it becomes very dangerous because she potentially could become quite hopeless. And that makes people very vulnerable.
Generally thinking about suicide and death is not good for me at all. So that's why I don't want to.
With the stigma that still surrounds mental illnesses like manic depression, I thought Cordelia was very brave, allowing me to witness such a private moment. Like the others I've met, she was prepared to be seen and heard so that all of you know better about the illness we suffer. Just like me, Cordelia has come to accept that she has a chronic condition that will be with her for the rest of her life. That's a painful realization. But she also learned from Jan Scott that it's like having asthma, and that while it's always going to be there, the key for most people is in finding ways to reduce the attacks and to make them less severe. That's where treatment comes in. Cordelia accepts it, but what about me? After all I've seen and heard, I'm still unsure. I feel reluctant to embrace a life on medication, but I do fear the intensity of my moods and where they can lead.
As I say, I don't want to kill myself. I wouldn't mind dying. It's a terrible thing to say. And I hear myself and I think, oh my God, my mother's going to hear me say that. And I think, how awful, Stephen, what do you mean you wouldn't mind dying? That's a terrible thing to say. And all those who love me would say, what an awful thing to say. But a lot of them would say, yeah, I know that feeling too.
And yet, as with all bipolars, there is this other side. I love my condition too. It's infuriating, I know, but I do get a huge buzz out of the manic side. I rely on it to give my life a sense of adventure, and I think most of the good about me has developed as a result of my mood swings. In this journey, I asked many of my fellow manic depressives how they balance this contradiction. I asked them if they could press a button to release them from their bipolarity, would they do so? Most, despite traumatic moments in their life, said no. So after all this, what would I do?
I wouldn't press the button and live a normal life, not for all the tea in China.
You can find out more about manic depression and treating the condition by logging on to bbc.co.uk/health or by calling our helpline on 08000 155 327.